Welcome to Your Number Man, the podcast where we dive deep into business, finance, and entrepreneurship. I am your host, Johan, but you can call me Your Number Man. Over the years, I've worn many hats in the business world, from marketing ace to financial expert. And now I'm here to share my expertise with you. Each week, we'll explore strategies, insights, and stories to help you navigate the complexities of running a successful business. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting, this podcast is your go-to resource for all things business and finance. So grab a drink, settle in, and let's unlock the secrets to building and thriving business together. This is Your Number Man, where we help you achieve a bigger life in business. So last week we talked about the profit and loss, and we touched on gross profit. It was important to me that our first episode laid the right foundation for your financial educational journey. In my personal opinion, the gross profit, or GP as I probably would refer to it going further, is probably the most important business tool. There is so much to talk about in business finances, and I plan to break it down into bite-sized episodes to make sure they're all easily digestible. We'll cover most of the fundamentals over the next few weeks. I want to speak more about GP in this episode, as I believe it is vital to your business success. Imagine your business is like a chess set. Well, let's say cash is the king in a game of chess. I can only move once, and the king is a bit slow to react to the other player's move. One missed step and checkmate, it's game over. So if cash is king, then GP is definitely the queen. Perhaps not as important as the king, but she can make all the moves, react faster, have a longer reach, and set a platform for a successful game. As I mentioned in episode 1, GP is your business income minus all the direct costs relating to that income, or simply cost of goods sold, or COGS. It's usually the cost of inputs, direct labors, and contractors. So the GP ratio is the percentage when you divide the gross profit over your total business income. So for instance, if you make $1,000 in sales and your COGS is $500, that means your gross profit is $500. So now you divide gross profit of $500 over your sales of $1,000 and you get 50%. So keep in mind that GP must not be confused with markup, which is a whole other kettle of fish, and we'll get into that in the next few weeks when I discuss the pricing strategies. So why is it important to know your GP? Well, it gives a very clear indication of your benchmark. It helps with your budgeting. It helps with your pricing strategy. It helps to track efficiencies. It helps to analyze cost from the start, and also discount strategies. Tracking over time can tell you the consistency of your business. If you are able to measure it, you can definitely manage it. If you can't measure your business, you can't manage it. So the starting point to achieve a higher net profit and return on investment all start with where is my GP and what role does it play in the rest of your financial instruments in your business. The higher the GP, the faster you reach your break even. And once you reach your break even, every dollar in GP goes straight to the bottom line. Now let's talk about a break even. So it's really important to know your break even point. And if you don't know your GP, there's no way you can really work out what is your break even point. Your gross profit and your break even point goes hand in hand. Understanding and knowing your break even is crucial for long-term success and stability. I'm going to talk a little bit about a real-life scenario. For the sake of confidentiality, I've changed a few names, dates, numbers, and a few specifics. But the concept is very real, not only as I've seen it in my client, I've seen it a lot in my life, where people end up with a pretty happy ending. I wouldn't say ending, it's almost like a happy beginning when you really start digging into your numbers. John and Paul started a business in 2005 to manufacture and supply electronic parts for cars. John was an electrical engineer working at a major car manufacturer at that time, and Paul had a business background, and he also worked as a project manager in an electrical company. So they met each other through their wives, They never really became close friends, but whenever they were at social functions, they just clicked. They talked about their jobs and opportunities to small business and electronics for that matter, and how great it would be to have a business. So they decided to start a business together. Within 6 months, they landed a big contract with a local car manufacturer and made a small profit in their first year. A year later, they picked up some more business in Europe, the USA, and South Africa. So within 2 years, the business grew to 3 million turnover and their staff grew to about 9 people. And that includes themselves as senior management, an admin person, an ops manager, and 5 people on the factory floor. In the second year, they showed a 360,000 profit. That is just around 12%. So that was enough to pay their tax, put some cash back in the business, and declare a small dividend for them each. Now, sadly, that was the last time they took profit out of the business for a very long time. And their winning streak was short-lived as the global financial crisis hit in 2008. The previous year, they had 3 million in sales, and now all of a sudden they sat with 1.7 million at the end of 2008. So they had to let their ops manager go, to factory staff. They had to reduce the admin person 2 days per week. John and Paul also had to drop their salaries. They got heavily sucked into the business, and where they once had a freedom to work on a business rather than in it, they had to work a lot of extra hours to keep the momentum of the operational engine going. So John and Paul continued and were able to increase the export market numbers in a few years. Paul really dug into his sales connections and skills to hit a few big wins for local numbers. Their big client and some other motor companies around South Australia announced they would close their manufacturing later in the decade. At least they had a bit of a heads up. They know it's not going to happen overnight, and they got a few years to prepare for it, but they know it's going to be a massive blow to them, and they really got to get on top of their marketing. They did everything they could. They stayed off sort of profitable, but very marginal. The cash flow was struggling and the bank was willing to increase the overdraft to 500,000. But of course, that comes with a price. So both of them had to put down all the equity in the properties as security. They did spend a lot of money on research and development and marketing, and eventually got the income back to 3 million in the mid-2010s. In 2017, their main customer closed their factory as expected, but John and Paul were prepared. So in 2017, with their major client closing their doors, they had a chat with the accountant. Well, the good news was there wasn't any tax to pay, because the bad news was there wasn't a profit. So that was perhaps not the best scenario. They were running around, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And their tax accountant mentioned, well, perhaps it would be in their interest to really speak to a cost and management accountant. And that's where I came in the scene. The first thing we've done in 2018 was really to get a better handle on their numbers. We looked in detail at their margins. We then calculated that the factory staff actually cost them much more than they realized. Cost of labor did not include things like work cover, payroll tax, sick leave, long service leave, annual leave, and all the cost of public holidays, which had a massive effect on the gross profit. So where they originally had a gross profit of 44% on the books, after recalculating it, the GP was actually closer to 38%, which is massive. That 6% could make or break a company. At that stage, their income was about 3.7 million. So over the years, they grew the management team up to 6, including again, John and Paul. Luckily, since the beginning of the business, John and Paul were able to pay themselves a salary. They had 2 admin people, they had part-time marketing and salesperson and ops manager, but rent was expensive. Other general expenses was also really getting tough, and the total overheads came to about 1.2 million. We did a simple calculation and divided the overheads over the GP, which gave us a break-even of 3.2 million. So they used the break-even as a communication tool with the staff to make sure everybody was on the same page, and although sales might look quite promising, the profit was actually quite marginal, which they explained to the sales people. So while the overall GP was 38%, this means that some product could be as low as 30% and other closer to 40%. So the average GP was 38%, some lower and some higher. John and Paul completed a full review of all their products, income streams and discounts, and analyzed their costing and pricing structure. This paid off pretty well as they removed a few rotten apples and identified areas with higher margins to give more focus to. They also implemented better production system to increase efficiencies and installed some robotics. The marketing and sales team worked very hard to specifically focus on the products with the higher margins. The following year, sales increased to about 4 million. But the good thing is the GP was higher at 42%, leaving the company with a net profit of almost 500,000. So as if the global financial crisis wasn't enough. And then bloody COVID happened in 2020. But that's one thing John and Paul learned, is to be persistent and keep on going. They took all the challenges head on, largely because of all the good work they did in getting a better handle on their margins and strategy. They created around the numbers. Their resilience seemed to pull them through. And it was not long before they were on track again. They also introduced an online shopping page, which helped a lot with additional sales and much better margins. Why better margins? Because they're selling direct to the customer. They don't have to give up profit to a retail shop, which is pretty awesome. During COVID, it was actually a good system because everybody sat at home buying online. In the last financial year, the sales grew to 4.8 million with a gross profit of 45%. So again, a few years earlier, 38%. Now, they're on 45% with $1 million more in sales. The overheads was a bit higher, came to about 1.4, which left them with a profit of 760,000, and that was before depreciation. So a net profit of almost 16%. Now, that is something that will lay down a very good foundation for future growth. After depreciation, the tax bill was just over 100,000. So they paid himself each a dividend of 200,000 and they put some cash back into the business. John paid off his home and Paul got a boat and a piece of land next to the river where he hopes to build a shack in the next few years. Things are really looking good now for the business. They are in the process of landing a big defense contract and hope to negotiate a gross profit of about 50% on this project. A few years ago, 38%, and now they're talking about a 50% gross profit. They were also recently contacted by a US company that is keen to buy the business. But John and Paul are actually not really keen to sell it yet. They're having too much fun. They love their work now. They are very happy in their business and they truly believe that they really have a bigger life in their business. It all comes back to the fact that they got on top of their numbers. They learned the hard news that gross profit was not at flash, but worked hard to increase GP and good sales. They trusted the process and knew that success breeds success. Now, that's a nice story. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. Now, I've seen very similar scenarios in a lot of business over the years, not only from my clients, but stories I've read and other people that I spoke to, other podcasts I've listened to as well. And some of them had good outcomes, some not so good. But I can honestly tell you that the companies that had a real good handle on their gross profit gets more confident with their numbers and know exactly their break even, have a much higher rate of success. Somebody once said, believing a solution paves the way to a solution. So John and Paul believed there could be a solution getting them closer to a very sustainable profit. And they did find a solution. And today's numeric is, in Down Under I met a tough mate. Breaking horses was his trade. What he lacked was business muscle, until numbers stopped the hustle. He then smiled and said, "Mate, that is great." And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me, and I hope today's session was valuable and you feel inspired to take action in your business. Remember, business success is about more than just numbers. It's about passion, determination, and a relentless drive to pursue your dreams through the help of numbers. So keep pushing forward, learning and striving for a bigger life in your business. If you found this podcast valuable, be sure to subscribe. Follow us on socials and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode. And one last thing, If you want access to additional resources that will help you fast track your cash flow and financial freedom, visit yournumberman.com.au. Until next time, this is Johan Zanik, your number man, signing off. Thanks again. Remember, the content provided in this podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. I strongly recommend consulting with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions or financial choices. If you're a business looking for help understanding your break-even point and gross profit, or if you need a helping hand in increasing your bottom line, visit yournumberman.com.au and get in touch to see how we can help